Again, welcome to those of you who are here for this portion of the forum tonight, and we do appreciate the Columbia Board of Realtors for hosting this and doing traditionally what is called the first forum, the kickoff forum to the political season. Again, we are looking at an election on April the 5th. We just heard from school board members a moment ago, and now we're going to focus on the race for mayor of Columbia. And there are 5 who are candidates for that position. They are in front of you right now, and they are going to have 121 more forums between now and
Dan Lyles, moderator.
no, thank you, Barbara Buffalo. I don't think I'll do that, but I will say this, that it's kind of interesting to watch the evolution and the transformation over the many days and months. And sometimes I've had some candidates have told me in the past that they are so used to hearing each other's answers that they could give them themselves. And so I think that would be kind of a fun thing to do in the future, is to switch the nameplates and have your answer as if you were one of the other candidates. I doubt if anybody will do that, though. It's way too important of a job for us to do that. It's a important responsibility that you all have said that you would like to do for the city of Columbia. So here's how we'll do it tonight. We'll start as we did in the previous session, and this is the format that they used with the Columbia Board of Realtors forums over the years. You'll have 2 minutes to introduce yourselves, and then we'll do questions and answers. I'll say to the audience, as I said a moment ago, we'll kind of get into the program. We will fairly soon, within, 25 or 30 minutes, ask if there are any questions from any of you on the floor. The microphone is in the center aisle. You just step up there and ask your question. And we'll go through taking turns. When we are in the question and answer portion, we'll do 90-second responses, and then if there's anything that we want to follow up on, we're going to time that with 30 seconds, although we're pretty flexible with that. And sometimes I think what we need to talk about is longer than just 30 seconds, and I appreciate the organizers of this event to give us the freedom to do that when we need to. So we'll start, and I'll just start in the order closest to me to farthest from me, and have our candidates start their 2-minute opening comments, and we'll start with David Seaman.
Thank you, David. Thank you for the Board of Realtors for having us tonight. Even to each of you who came out and braved this mid-Missouri day. It turned out to be a pretty decent day, actually. My name is David Seaman. When my family moved to Columbia in 2003, I was a sophomore in high school. I have to tell you, I didn't really understand the significance of Columbia, Missouri, or really know where Missouri was in sophomore in high school. So shocking. But in the last 19 years that I've been here, I've experienced both tragedy and triumph. I lost my father at 17, became a father myself a few months later, and then graduated from Rockbridge High School, all in that area. Finished Rockbridge, ended up graduating from Columbia College, and then I pursued a lifelong dream of joining my father and grandfather's Marines, joining the United States Marine Corps as a second lieutenant. And when that service ended, my wife and I couldn't think of any place else to go other than to come back home, because this is now my adopted home, Missouri. And I now have the privilege of serving on our school board, and what is quite possibly one of the most difficult times of public education in the United States. As we begin to move forward in this city, it's kind of reuniting ourselves and looking at the issues that impact us all. I said before, I love this city, but you can love something and acknowledge its faults, and its flaws. I know this because I think my wife utters that sentence every time I walk in a room. We have a housing crisis that's growing. We have had and continue to have a policing crisis in which we do not have enough police officers, and we have to also balance that with low confidence in the department among some in our community. It's going to take leaders who can plan both short term and long term. It's going to take leaders who can look through the lens for everyone, not just a few. It's going to take leaders who view the terms equity, inclusion, and diversity as more than just a 15-second soundbite of buzzwords or a misinterpreted Martin Luther King quote. I believe I am one of those leaders, believe over the last 2 years on our school board, whether you agree with decisions I've made or not, I have showcased that mental determination to continue to make decisions for all of us. And that's why I'm sitting here. And I'm eager to join my other 4 candidates, I guess my colleagues at this point, and demonstrating to you why April 5th was just selected as the next mayor of Columbia. Thank you.
I should have said in our opening remarks that right up here at the front, she's got the timer on, and she'll give you the card that will say 30 seconds, and then eventually she'll show you the stop if you're still talking, and after that, if it's gone on long enough, she will shock you underneath your Randy Minshew, welcome. It's good to see you. Your opening comments, please.
Appreciate the board of realtors for hosting us tonight. I see a lot of familiar faces out here, people we've done business with over the years. And I'm excited to visit with y'all tonight. Cindy and I moved here in 1994. We raised our 4 kids. We raised my sister-in-law's 3 kids, so 7 kids graduated through Rockbridge. I don't know how we got that done, but we did. I've been a small business owner here. We had 2 ice cream stores, and I owned a company called Footnote Windows, Doors, and More. So I'm either the ice cream man or the window siding guy. So my campaign is based on making Columbia safer and stronger. And so what does a safer, stronger Columbia look like? We must make Columbia safe. When families don't believe or feel like a community is safe, they choose to move out or never move in the first place. Recent data from the FBI shows that reported violent crimes in Columbia went from 94 in 2019 to 442 in 2020, increasing more than anywhere else in the state of Missouri. I believe we must stand alongside law enforcement, with City Hall showing them support rather than judgment, equipping them with the resources they need to make our community safe. If we want the best for our city, we must include an intentional focus on keeping our streets and our neighborhoods safe. We must make Columbia affordable. Columbia has one of the highest costs of living in Missouri. Our housing costs are higher, our taxes are higher, even popcorn in a movie costs more here. Over the years, new taxes have been proposed and advocated for, and Columbians are increasingly dissatisfied with the services being provided. Columbia hasn't had a business person as a mayor for the better part of 4 decades. I will use my years of experience in the private sector to bring more common sense to Columbia's finances. We must make Columbia work. Columbia has over 15 full-time city employees and a $500 million budget, and yet we don't do the little things well. We have potholes that never get filled, crumbling sidewalks, and a less than ideal trash and recycling collection process. We have an aging infrastructure that is limiting future development, and we're using patchwork solutions to pass the buck on to the next generation. I will focus every day as mayor on making Columbia work. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tanya Heath, your opening statements. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. My name is Tanya Heath, and I was born and raised in Columbia. And I joined the mayoral race because of a conversation I had this summer with a garbage collector. We were doing our 3rd garage sale, and he happened to come by, and it was extremely hot. And we were talking about how that, they were 12 or 14 actually employed, and it should be 28. And even the number 28 is shocking for the number of people in Columbia. And then I found out that unfortunately, because of the 2-bag policy, that some people in Columbia were yelling at the garbage collectors as they picked up trash. And that upset me as a person of Columbia, because that to me does not represent the Columbia that I grew up with and the respect that we have towards one another. And so, as it is in Columbia, I sent a note to our neighborhood saying, please thank the garbage collector, because it's 108 degrees and it's a really tough job, and we are so thankful that they're doing it. And then they sent it to a TV station, and the TV station came to interview me, and they said, what do you think about the 12 out of 28? And I said, well, I think that we need to advertise it as a job for people that like the outdoors and that also have a sense of high purpose. Because believe it or not, garbage collection has to do with our health, it has to do with our safety. It's so important, and yet when they come through our neighborhoods with that loud truck, it's like, we are so used to them, but we don't take the time to say thank you. And then they asked about, what did I think about people yelling at our garbage collectors? And I said, we are the face of garbage collection. And we need to talk to our city leaders and we need to work with our city leaders. And then, just be supportive of the people actually doing this hard work, because otherwise we're going to be doing this hard work, And after that, they left and I thought about it and I was like, I'm at a point in my life where I could be a city leader and I could work to brainstorm and communicate and figure out a way to make our basics run better. And so that is why I am running. My background is I was in advertising sales in the 90s. I have a wellness business, and I also am an adjunct instructor in the journalism school in strategic communication. And part of the other insight that I have is that the baby boomers are aging. I'm a Gen Xer, but I've been working with the millennials and the Gen Z, and I understand their desire to have a future, but I also see that they're frustrated. So I'd like to contribute to the solution of employees for our city.
Thank you. Margaret Buffalo, welcome, and your opening comments.
Thank you, David. And I think I join everybody in this room who said it's going to be weird when we turn into KFRU and we don't hear your voice. So
If you all had been listeners to KFRU, maybe I had a radio.
well, no,
but thank you very much.
Yes, yes. So most of you know me. My name is Barbara Buffalo, and I'm running for mayor of Columbia. It has been my privilege to be in Columbia for over 20 years. My husband and I are raising our 2 kids here, and we love Columbia, and it's our forever home. Columbia is a special community, and it deserves a mayor that loves this community and is willing to do the work. I do not have any other political aspirations. I've often said that the only job I'm really meant to do is to be mayor and to lead this community. And it's going to be work. We're in a period of transition right now. We're about to have a new mayor, new council members. We have a new city manager. There's been turnover in the city organization that we'll be leading. And we need somebody that has that institutional knowledge. I worked for the city for the past 11 years. I was a department director, and so I know how a budget works and what we can and cannot spend that money on. I also know where those opportunities for improvement are from looking at cities across the nation and in international waters as well. And we also need somebody that has the relationships within the community. And I am that mayor. I often talk about how I've led cross-departmental, cross-governmental, cross-community-wide committees on opportunities for improvement in our community and how we can listen to our partners and stakeholders that convene voices so we make the decisions that are right and progress for our community. And it's more than just experience. It's knowing who do we want to lead us and who has the vision for where we're going to be in 10, 20, 50 years. We need someone that has the energy and the experience to lead us there. And I am that mayor. I've been part of these regional and national and international work groups. They're looking some of the best practices that other communities are doing and how can we implement them here with the inspiration and the vision that we have in our community. And I think my experience in that and my experience in Columbia and elsewhere help lead us so that Columbia can have our vision where everyone has the opportunity to have a place to live, work, learn, and play. So, thanks.
All right, thank you.
Time. Sorry.
No extra points. Maria or Paulo, thank you for being here and your opening comments, please.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. It's good to see you all. My name is Maria Orapollo. I moved to Columbia in 2005 with my husband and my 2 older children. My background is having lived on the East Coast, in Massachusetts, and in Virginia. And in both of those states, I have worked for 5 municipalities, mostly as a public information officer for the CDBG program, for the tax assessor's office, for recycling, for solid waste, or neighborhood services. I've had a background. My husband worked for 22 years as the affordable housing manager, development manager, for Fairfax County, Virginia, a community of 1 million people, 330,000 homes. When we first came to Columbia, of course, government is what we know. We jumped into volunteering, and the first thing we did was met John Clark, who yelled at me and told me that he didn't care that I came from Virginia, that we do things differently in Missouri. So he and I actually became friends because we worked at learning what was it that he wanted to see in Columbia and what I could bring to Columbia. In 2007, we had tragedy in our family. We became the guardians of my very premature granddaughter, who was born at 26 weeks. Her dad served and is still serving in the U.S. Navy. We come from a military background, so there was never any question of where this child was going to be raised. So we have had 9 years in the public school system in Columbia, and it's wonderful. We started to fall in love with the city. My husband became a commissioner on the Water and Light Board. I became a member of the Finance and Audit Committee in 2014. I'm still serving on that committee, and I've been serving as chair since 2016. What I'd like to say about my experience is I know where the money is. I know how it works. I know how it's reported. The other thing I did as a volunteer in Columbia is I started Transparency Matters Political Action Committee. It is now defunct, it is gone, but it was about asking the city to be transparent in its actions. What does transparency mean in government? It means you, the public, know what happens, when it happens, as soon as you can. It means we work collaboratively with the people who have the information, and we work with experts. Finally, issues that I brought forward, I worked with Reverend Gray, I guess he left, and as the Boone County Community Against Violence. And through that organization, we brought in 2 initiatives that have passed City Council. One was the co-responders to help police become guardians and instead of warriors when necessary. And the other was crime prevention through environmental design, was passed by City Council in 2019. I'm very proud of these accomplishments. I work in government because I know the basis that government provides to all its citizens. Whether you're living in a $1 million home or you're living on the streets, you are a citizen. We have to have solutions. And I believe I'm the person that can bring that experience to this.
All right. Thank you. I'll probably cough. When you hear me cough, that might be a signal you might look at these signs. We will start now solving the problems. And this issue has already been brought up, but it's one of the questions from, and what I am handed is from the Columbia Board of Realtors, some of the questions that they have on their mind. So I like to use those as well as my own. And then, as I said, we'll take some from the crowd. Let's start with this one, since it's a simple one. What's your opinion of the current trash and recycling service in the city? And we'll start with Randy Minshew on this one.
I believe David Sorrell, our director of solid waste, knows how to fix this issue. I think he's being interrupted from doing the job he knows he needs to do. I think there's evidence of 4 work sessions by the current city council trying to solve the trash issue. My opinion would be that David Sorrell should give his plan to the city manager, and the city manager would then come to city council and the mayor and present that. I personally think that the logo bag program does not work. I envision every day that trash is picked up, someone walks out to their curb with a trash bag that breaks and gets mad at city council. And so I think you could stand down from the current bag mandate, allow any 33-gallon bag to be picked up right now until the quality of the bag could be improved, until the supply of the bags could be adequate. I think we're headed towards maybe a hybrid answer to the roll cart issue. I think there are locations in Columbia where roll carts will not work. I think there's situations where it will not work. I've spoken to two large waste companies who told me that in your request for proposal as a city council, you would list the homes where it wouldn't work with a roll cart. And they said that's what happens in any other town that has roll carts. I believe that's where we're headed, but in the meantime, I think we need to stand down from our logoed bag mandate.
All right, thank you. And he did what I was going to ask all of you to do, and that is you can spend up to 90 seconds or so of your time to answer the question, what's your opinion of the current trash and recycling service? And then I was going to ask the follow-up with, which he answered, and that would, how would you change the current system, or what would you do with the current system? So Tanya Heath, you spoke of the solid waste collection quite a bit in your opening comment. Let's go from there. What is your opinion of what we see now? I know what your opinion is about our appreciation for what the persons are who do that job. Let's move beyond that.
Yes. Okay. So from what I understand, I believe that there's a confusion as to why we are limited to 2 bags. A possibility is that for the amount of employees we have, some people maybe in the past put out 10 bags. Well, if you're doing a whole city, you can't wear your employees out. That could be a reason why, but I don't think the reason is communicated to the general public in a way that we understand it. And I believe that we need to do a better job of advertising, because I do believe that we could have people that are looking for a purpose and like to work outdoors. And if they would come together with this job and see it not as just the end job, but see it as a starter job, that they can earn a reputation and then move up to more responsible jobs. I believe that if we're not gonna bag our leaves anymore, that we should buy a leaf crunching machine that they have in other cities and put it on the street, and they come by and they crunch it up, and that's great for the environment. And then with the 2-bag system, we also have issues with birthdays, Thanksgiving trash, and winter trash. And so we really need to think about what is gonna work for our town, and not only for our town now, but the fact that it keeps growing. And I don't think we're keeping up with the population growth and our basic need for garbage collection. So we need to address it.
I'll get the follow-up. If you want to clarify exactly, what would you do? What would you do? Having no limit on the bags, or using the logoed bags, or how would you deal with it right now?
Well, I believe I would have some sort of exemption bag for the extra, holidays and birthdays and Thanksgiving. Because I do think if it is an employee issue as far as not wearing out our current employees, then we do have to consider the 2-bag policy as something that is reasonable until we get more employees.
Have a position on roll carts?
I've listened to both sides, and I see the pros and the cons and the dangers of a roll cart just rolling down the street, but I also see that it's better for the, trucks and stuff like that. So, I would not be opposed to having a rule of new neighborhoods that are built so that roll carts can't roll dangerously in the street.
Barbara Buffalo, what's your opinion of the current trash and recycling service in the city?
Oh, man, I feel like I've talked about trash for a while. The current system, I believe that solid waste is trying to do the best with the rules that they're given to them. Right now, they're trying to accomplish achieving the same level of service that the community expects from them, with less resources, both in workers as well as the money to do the job, as well as being able to find the best practices. We have professionals on staff that propose what they think would work for the community, and it's up to council to take what they hear, listen to our feedback from the community, and have a system that works that's like fiduciary responsible. So
Okay,
that's how I feel
the
about
follow-up is, what would you change, if anything? What would you like to see done if you could make that decision?
Yeah, so in 2015, when we were talking about this, after probably I think 4 or 5 years of talking about this, a report went to council that had the options that was out there. And in them had a hybrid, similar to what you referred to, Randy. this idea about it might not work everywhere in the community, but you can look at this opportunity for having different size roll carts if you have them. Some communities, some streets that can't have them, what would be your opportunity then? So I think a hybrid system where you have that, it would reduce your workers' comp, where we have on average over $350,000 in workman's comp. It would help with employee turnover because people wouldn't be getting hurt as much. And you would have opportunity for people that they didn't have to have a CDL, they could also do the throwing for some of those hybrid ones. And I think it also just has better customer satisfaction. Because right now, people get really happy when they put their trash out at the curb and it goes away. And that's what we want now, and we want those opportunities for recycling back in our routes.
Maria or Apollo, your thought on the question about trash?
We love talking about trash in our neighborhood. I agree with Randy. Yes, the short-term solution right now is to not insist on the logo bags. But let's understand where all this came from first. Each truck route is 800 homes. We have 44,000 homes in Columbia. Okay, well, homes in Columbia. The workers went to their supervisors and said, this unlimited bulk pickup, unscheduled bulk pickup, somebody moves out, puts all of their stuff on the street, and they show up and they're picking up couches, file cabinets, bookcases. When they arrived thinking they were going to pick up 2, 3, maybe even 4 bags of household trash versus having to pick up unscheduled bulk. That was the first thing they asked for relief from that. The second thing they asked for was to limit the bags to 50 pounds because we're looking at stopping at 800 homes getting 1, 2, or 3 bags. Okay? That was what the problem was. I keep inviting people to the Finance and Audit Committee. Do you know why? Because we're the ones that are hearing from the Solid Waste Department. They're reporting to us because there was no oversight committee in the city for solid waste. So we've been hearing them. We've been looking at their forecasts. We've been looking at how their problems are affecting their budget and how their problems are affecting their work, if they're able to, if they're being effective, efficient, and economic, which right now they're not. As for roll carts, when I worked for Fairfax, Virginia, we put in roll carts. Columbia is a beautiful little town, but you're not unique. Every municipality who has had roll carts have had at least 3 sizes of roll carts and exceptions to people who can't use the roll carts for whatever reason. There are programs in place to deal with them. I believe in the roll carts. It's public safety. It's employee safety.
David Seaman, your answer to the question.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll be a little loud. So I think it's been touched on a couple times here, which is the reason that we have the 2 bag solution at the moment, because asking sanitation workers to pick up, as Maria said, multiple 50-pound bags caused a lot of injuries. And resulted in both injuries and workers' comp claims going on. That's why we have that 2-bag solution. I do agree with the rest of the candidates that we do need kind of a hybrid solution. In the short term, allowing more bags to be used. As a former logistics officer, the supply chain on how we're doing these bags makes me cringe on the inside. Getting the voucher in the mail and then going to a store and trying to find them, just searching. 3 kids at home is tough. It's almost impossible. So in the short term, allowing those bags to be any number of bags we put out. In the medium to long term, we do need roll carts. Different size roll carts with accommodations for the disabled, our senior citizens, and like Brandon said, areas around the city where roll carts are not going to be useful. And I'll give you an example. I'm from Columbia, South Carolina. Charleston, South Carolina is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. Nice, historic area. Their historical preservation department refused to allow people to raise their homes because they thought that raising the houses that were being flooded would make the city less beautiful. That city allowed roll calls.
Do any of you want to make any final comment on this, Randy?
So one thing to consider, the two companies that I talked to both said that they would purchase all our equipment, hire all of our people if we wanted to consider outsourcing. And 5 years ago, Republic offered us $25 million for our trash, for our dump site. So I think that's something to think about. And then the second thing is we don't really have a 2-bag limit. You can put out as many bags as you want, but when you go through your 102 bags, 104 bags, 52 of them per half year, you have to pay $10 for a roll of 5, so it's $2 a bag. So you could put out 20 bags if you need to, and the city will pick those up. So it's not really, it's a rationed idea that you get 2 a week, but if you use more, you just pay for more, and there you go.
Anyone else on the issue? Yeah, Maria?
Randy and I have talked about this. The $25 million for the landfill is a drop in the bucket for what that landfill is worth to us as a city. I get it, I understand. Can we manage it? I think we can. I think we need good policy. I think we need good basics. My campaign is about getting the basics right. Of the landfill and the trash collection and the MRF, the recycling facility. It's a treasure. Selling even just the landfill for $25 million, I believe would have been short-sighted on part of the city. But Randy's right. It's a valuable commodity.
Any of the other three that haven't made a comment want to before we go on, Tanya?
I still think that we should have extra bags, maybe they would be red bags or something, for birthdays, winter holidays, and Thanksgiving.
All
Just
right.
saying.
Anybody else? Going once? Twice. Done. All right, we're gonna start with Tanya Heath on this one because it's her turn and we try to vary who is first to answer questions. Another one from the Board of Realtors, which is a good question, a pertinent question. What role should the city play in aiding those dealing with home insecurity?
Okay, so home insecurity. That would be a good question because I think as I look at the cost of apartments for young people or people that are living in apartments and then homes and compare it to when I was in college and a young single person, it is really challenging to find a safe place. And I know that the students at MU were struggling because during the pandemic, they might be the only healthy one. And so they were asked to work like 3 shifts and they were also supposed to be in class. And they couldn't say no to their boss because they couldn't lose their job because they were paying for their rent. And the rent is so high that I just think that it's great that we're a successful city, but we don't want to be like Boulder where they have crazy rent and people that are in emerging incomes or young people can't really afford to live there. So I think we need to figure something out where we've got an area of the city that has safe and nice areas where people can live and feel safe and be a part of our community because we need people at all income levels.
Barbara Buffalo, your thoughts about the role the city should play in dealing with home insecurity?
So I think it's first important, the city has a role, we have some funding programs like through CDBG and our home funding programs that both help with some like affordable housing, both development of, as well as programs that support it. But I think the other thing that the city does really well is that we're the main communicator that helps get the information out there about some of our community partners. And housing is a spectrum, right? We have everything from our unsheltered housing all the way to workforce housing and affordable housing. And so if you think about it, the role of the city is both to make sure that we have that spectrum available to our community members. We're about to get some of the American Rescue Funds into Columbia. And the question is back on council right now is what can we do to provide both emergency shelter for those like having issues right now with finding affordable housing, as well as what can we do to help development and get those funds out there. I know it's like you haven't put your thumb on time. Now, housing, when we talk about more things that the city can do, you know, I know through Water and Light, we own our electric utility. I'm gonna follow you.
30
Oh,
seconds.
no, 30 seconds. We have our electric utility. One of the things that we worked on when I was with the city was getting programs out there for helping improve energy efficiency in rental housing. So we gave money out to property owners to put insulation into attics. Because when we talk about housing instability, sometimes it's just the cost of housing. So housing insecurity or housing cost burden, the ability to afford your rent, your utilities, your transportation, and what can we do with some of the granting programs we have to give money?
Maria or Apollo?
I
Or Apollo,
was,
excuse me.
or Apollo, Judge Brooks. I loved the question in the way it was formed when I received the email. Rather than talking about a specific population or a specific spectrum of our housing insecurity. Because housing insecurity is happening in all of our neighborhoods. The person who's retired and ready to move on to a smaller downsizing or want to live with their children, and they have to get contractors in to work on their home that they haven't upgraded in 20 years. The stress, the financial impact that has on someone causes them to have housing insecurity issues. I'm going to start with the homeless. I'm working with a group of people, and it's heartbreaking what we're seeing out there. We're feeding 65 people a day. These are people who won't go into the shelters. They're living in the streets. All the way up to people who have homes, and I know the realtors know this, they want to sell, but to get out of it, they're going to have to ask a lot of money for it. And the buyers are coming into town, but I'm not sure we can sell those big dollar homes. But so again, housing insecurity runs the whole spectrum. Here's where I see the problem. We have a lot of plans on the shelf. The city is notorious for doing studies and studies. It's like I counted just this afternoon 6 housing studies in the past 10 years. Every one of them has great ideas in them. The majority of them start with, we need to change our ordinances. We need to level the playing fields for developers. We need to help create neighborhoods in ways where people want to live. We need to look at the ordinances. We need to get the basics right.
Okay, David Seaman?
So I'm really glad that Maria touched on that last part. We have a number of plans that are already on the shelf on how we can solve this. The problem is that we run into the issue that we always have. We have the willingness to try, we lack the will to follow through. And that will to follow through is typically based on politics. So we come up with these mayor's task force on affordability and housing security multiple times. But we come up with, we ask those task force to come up with a list of recommendations. And as you go through those 10 recommendations, there's only a few that people in this city feel are politically okay. Problem is, you need all 10 to actually get something done. So calling for another task force and simply saying, don't give me a list, don't give me a buffet list, give me an entire plan that encompasses all of the things that we've already talked about, and then we can talk about that single plan, not single issues. We also talked about, I'm very happy to talk about this, there's a spectrum of housing. You have the unhoused, you have folks who are renting, you have folks who own homes. The unhoused, talking about using our ARPA funds to build a permanent shelter so they can get back on their feet. The one thing that we forget is you can't get a job without an address. And if I'm asking you to come to a shelter, a one-off shelter every once in a while, that's not a permanent address. For our renters, talking about rental assistance. Almost the same thing for our folks who own a house and are paying for a mortgage. We're talking about timber prices going up. That's a climate change issue. Burning through, watching wildfires throughout the West Coast, burn down timber. And that's not gonna stop for a while. So, I'm sorry, I'm getting the flashing red light.
Appreciate that. Maybe we can come back to some of these a little bit. Randy, didn't you?
Well, housing insecurity is described as where your rent costs 30% of your income. So if you bring home $1,000 a week and rent is $1,000, you're at 25%. You wouldn't be considered housing insecure. Where if you bring home $600-700 a week and your rent is $1,000 a month, you're above that 30%. So housing insecurity happens at a bunch of different levels. Now, once you get up past a certain level, you're making enough. You know, if you make $500,000 a year, you can afford more than 25-30%. So housing insecurity at that level wouldn't be the same. So anything above that 30%, then it's still considered housing insecurity. There's a group of people, once you get down to a certain point, where there's an army of folks here in Columbia, because we have great programs with Love Columbia, Salvation Army. There are what Maria does that work with people at a certain level. It's the working folks who are in that range where they can't afford it. And Columbia, right now, the starter homes are the used homes. There's no used homes because we limit the amount of development that we can do. And so you can't get new homes started. It takes several years to get a development started. People move from their first house to their second house to a new neighborhood, buy a new home. That makes rental property available. We have less than a month's supply. The average is 6 months supply of housing. We have less than a month. We're creating a shortage, which causes the price to go up. It's supply and demand.
I will look, I know we have a lot of realtors here. If anybody wants to ask a follow-up question about housing insecurity, I'm kind of not sure whether I have a follow-up question on this or not, but anybody who wants to ask that question, or I can ask a related question that also comes from the Board of Realtors. And this is picking up where Randy Minshew just left off. We've been talking about a solution to affordable housing, and that's what he was talking about for a long time. We're dealing with home shortage in all price range. How would you create additional housing in Columbia, and what can we do to add affordable housing? Barbara Buffalo, it's your turn to go first.
Thank you, David. Yeah, so I think one of the things that I remember when we were talking about this, first off, just like I said, the spectrum of having this opportunity. And I appreciate, Randy, when you refer to, if we're having some, for instance, I think I saw the reference the other day, two teachers working together, have two teachers living in the same house. The house they used to be able to afford is now no longer available to them. That inventory is out. And I think on the latest that I saw from the Columbia Board of Realtors, our inventory is super low, but yet prices are still high. Existing homes are selling like at higher prices than new homes, which is just something that we've never seen before. And I think when we talk about where we're going to put our homes and where affordable homes go, the city has an opportunity to incentivize intentional infill. And that's where, because what rises costs, and I've talked to some home builders here in town, what adds to a lot of the cost is that when you're developing a new home, is access to the utilities, getting a sewer line put in if there's not already one there, having utilities go to it. And so we have opportunities within Columbia where we can do intentional infill. And so that's thinking about places where we can have a little bit more mixed use density, where we can go up and have more multifamily housing, and then to create more neighborhoods, still maintaining your community character, but thinking about how do we create community, create neighborhoods by doing some of that, which will bring down the cost because you already have existing infrastructure.
Maria?
These are all great ideas. And you know what I want to say is I want to sit down with the real estate people. I want to sit down with the developers, because across the country, cities smaller than us and bigger than us have been dealing with the issue of affordability. One of the plans that's on our shelf is the Fair Housing Task Force report from 2019. They were addressing the issue of affordability, but every one of their recommendations, as David said, all 10 of them, affect every level of housing costs. Again, we have the plans on the shelf. We need the experts to come to the table to discuss, to hash out, and to show us being city leaders, where the fault lines are. Where do we fill in so that something can happen? Where do we put our zoning regulations? Can we be as crazy as one community in Virginia that's getting rid of R1 zoning? Because they're finding that affordability is accessed that way. Or how about Toronto, whose housing prices were so out of control, they passed a law for alleyway housing. So people were able to build houses on the alleyway, sharing the lot, sharing the infrastructure, infill, as Barbara mentioned. There are solutions out there. And I know almost everyone in this room has an idea. Why aren't we talking about this comprehensively? That's my question.
Okay, David Seaman?
So there are a number of solutions here. We can change our zoning ordinances. We can go in and lower the fees for new housing developments, lowering them in a way that does not impact the long-term viability of those homes. Because what we don't want to do is end up lowering fees, allowing builders to make shortcuts, and then we have folks in homes that are just not viable after 5 to 10 years. I talked to Randy Cole a couple weeks ago, and he gave me a very impressive stat. So in 1960, there were about 60,000 people in Colombia, but 715 affordable housing units. Today, we have almost 130,000 people in this city. We only have about 750 plus housing units. And in the last 60 or so years, we've added about 40 affordable housing units. And Bob touched on a great point there, and it is talking about density, furthering the density within our city, multifamily units that folks in most neighborhoods can actually get behind. I talked about in the last topic. We have the willingness to actually do this, but we tend to lack the will. It tends to be, I think that's a great idea until you put it in my backyard. That has to be something that we talk about. Because until we figure that out, all this is just theoretical. The houses have to go somewhere. Those housing developments have to be placed in someone's neighborhood. Until we have that conversation about the political will, it's not going to happen.
Randy Menchu.
So, I've always lived by the code that if the government knocks on your door and says, we're here to help, you should run. So when I hear us talking about what the government could do to restrict us into more housing or cheaper housing, it never works. It never works. It's never gonna work. We've got the mayor's climate action plan talks about limiting urban sprawl, which means if you do like Ann Arbor, Michigan did, you draw a circle around your town, you can't develop outside of that. The cost of a 3-bedroom home in Ann Arbor, Michigan is $550,000. And that's what happens when you try to limit what the folks in this room would do. If we would get out of the way, we put the UDC code in place, we did all of the comprehensive look, testing, talking, we had realtors, I know people in this room that worked on the UDC code. We put that into place so that the city council could kind of get out of the way. Now we have this UDC code, we have planning and zoning, and the city council still votes on just about everything we have to do with development. We're never going to restrict ourselves into more housing, and we're never going to get the price of housing down if we don't increase the inventory. It's a real simple solution, really.
We have one more on this particular question, Tanya Heath.
All right, so I would say that part of the whole housing issue is that we need to look at our older houses in Columbia. And I would say that faith and other nonprofit organizations could send people to go and help, do repairs and paint and make the house look great for the people that are living there. And some of the people in those houses have, elderly people that need like a handicap ramp and things like that. And I just think that we can help our neighbor to create better quality of the houses that we have. And then we also can do trainings on how to keep what we have going better. The other part is that we need to look at the future of who's going to be owning these houses. And right now, I know that, you have to be a single owner or a family and things like that. Well, what about if we had a new neighborhood and it was known that in that new neighborhood that we had either different families or different people of different ages all living there, but they had to follow the code of conduct for keeping the house in good order so that it wasn't just, destroyed and stuff in a few years of living there. I know that that is a different kind of thought, but if you look at the young people that are coming up, they're getting married later and they're not able to build equity because they can't afford houses right now. Thank you.
Anybody else with a follow-up on this particular answer or thought in regard to this?
Stephen, I have a follow-up.
Okay.
It was just in the something that Randy said, and I agree that right now with the urban services boundary, urban services area, the way it's been interpreted is this idea of like like I imagine like a castle wall, and you can't go beyond it. And I remember when it was being developed, the intent was not so that it would be something that council could, and they should not, say, no, you can't do. The intent was to incentivize, just what I talked about, incentivize infill development, because we already have infrastructure there, which makes it cheaper to build. And then also, so I think if it's the sort of programs we need to look at that, but I think it is up, and I agree with Randy, it's up to council.
Yeah, but it says limit urban sprawl. It doesn't say incentivize vertical.
I'm talking about
housing.
urban services boundary, like when the zoning, yeah,
Understand.
yeah.
I have it, okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Everything that's been said is great here, so I keep saying we need to sit down. The city has an opportunity to fix its ordinances and to make sure things are in conflict. One of the problems that I've been seeing at city council in the past 2 years is the UDC, as good as it is, and as thorough as it is, there are still conflicts in there. People are still running into problems when they're bringing in developing plans. So it's not a perfect solution. That. There's another thing called the FLUM, which is the future land use map. That needs to be updated. It involves looking at not only the boundary of the cities, but just outside of the boundary of our cities. There's a lot of stuff happening nationally. There's a lot of stuff happening north of town. There's a lot of stuff. We can't keep looking at the city of Columbia with only within our boundaries. We have to look at beyond our borders to see what's happening, to find out what's possible. And there we have the tools. Let's use them.
I don't mean this to be a follow-up, a formal follow-up question. It's more of an education for me, and I apologize, I don't know. But David, you and Maria, you both referred to like the Fair Housing Task Force report, and there are 10 suggestions on that. I would just like to hear one or two of them. I'm not asking you to advocate them. I'm just saying that I am illiterate when it comes to this. Do you have an example of one or two?
Yeah, I do. I brought actually, it's about 3 pages of whereases.
Probably wouldn't like to hear all of those.
I know.
Just give me an example.
Increasing the cost to develop affordable housing is widening the gap between what the market can feasibly produce to meet our growing demand for more affordability. And it's asking the city to address that specific issue.
All right.
There are things like that. Another one, which is one that I've seen work very well in other locations, is develop a housing trust fund. You allow higher density by paying into this housing trust fund, allowing the city to buy land to develop housing.
We're doing some of that, are we not?
We don't have a housing trust fund, not officially. We do not have a housing trust fund.
I think there are some places where we're buying land and
Yeah, we are, but it's
Okay,
not
building
through this mechanism
okay.
of allowing increased density by getting funding into the housing trust fund.
All right. Let's move on. I'm going to change the subject here. It's a pretty simple question that'll lead us into a bigger discussion. Maria or Apollo, you are first on this question. Midnight Saturday night. You feel safe being downtown Columbia?
I do because I know the people, but that's just me. I'm nuts like that. I'll go downtown. I have been hearing a lot about the crime increase, and we've had specific crimes that have gone up, and I think tragically we've lost friends, and friends have lost children as a result of this. I'm not convinced because I've not been shown the figures. We hear city leaders, I'm namely chief of police, says we have an increase in crime, but we still only have 14 cops out on the road. I want to know how they're being deployed. I want to know if cops are being asked to do things that maybe can be done by a co-responder and maybe be able to work investigations a little bit more. I'm not convinced. I haven't seen the numbers. And I think before any city council person puts their name to a check, they need to have a data-driven response to this. And I'm not clear that we have that. I think we as a community, media, have scared ourselves into thinking we suddenly have a major crime wave in the city.
David Seaman, Midnight Saturday night. Safe downtown?
Midnight Saturday night, I'm gonna be at home sleeping with my kids. So downtown. I'm not that young anymore. So Randy brought up a good stat. He said from 2019 to 2022 or 2020, we saw an increase from 94 violent crimes to 442 violent crimes. What actually happened was over the last few years, and to get quick information, and I'm going to answer a little bit of your question. What's been happening over the last few years is the FBI has been transitioning from one system to another. It was the Uniform Crime Reporting System to now the National Incident-Based Reporting System, or NIBRS. We all love government acronyms. That system took place and transferred over in October of 2019. So that 94 violent crimes is actually only consisted of October, November, and December of that last year. What the actual crime reporting stats are is that we did have 442 violent crimes that next year. What we have averaged since 2000 in Colombia is an average of 503 violent crimes a year. So that 442 is actually a drop. In 2020, we saw 552 violent crimes. So I just want to give some context to those stats because I read the same thing in the Tribune and I was a little confused on why I went from 94 to 442. It seemed like it was consistent. As to being out in downtown at midnight, I'm not going to be there, one. But this isn't just about downtown, and we keep talking about downtown. These crimes are taking place across the city, and they typically take place in areas where folks who, be real here, look like me. We don't talk about those because they don't take place in an area where people feel like they're threatened most of the time. You say downtown, people go, "Oh man, that's bad happening. I don't want to be down there." Talk about some of these other parts of the city that people don't typically go to. It's pretty quiet. Very made a good point. There's only 14 police officers out in the street at any point in time. Right now, there's 14 officers patrolling all over Columbia. We need to add to that number. But before we add to that number, we need to ensure that things like our traffic disparity stops goes down. Because if 10% of the population looks like me, but we're being pulled over 30% of the time, that's a problem. And if we haven't solved that issue yet, it's going to be pretty hard to get the public on board with hiring more police officers.
Randy Minshew, you know the question.
Yeah, so, it's interesting about the stats that David gave. Jeff City went down in that same crime report, so given all of those factors, Jeff City went down. So, my belief is that city council and the mayor are meddling with the police department. That's just my thought. I think Chief Jones knows what to do. I think if Chief Jones doesn't know what to do, Chief Jones knows who to ask. I don't think Chief Jones had ever asked the city council or the mayor what he should do to police our city. Nor should he, because we're getting elected to serve. I didn't fill out a resume that said anything about what I know about policing. I don't feel safe going downtown. I think we need to talk about cameras downtown. I know we've solved a lot of crimes by having cameras in the parking garages downtown. It's an interesting stat when you talk about the stops and the number of people or the percentage of people that are stopped. Because if you take the whole city, that stat looks wrong. If you take the areas where the crime is, that statistic is not the same as what David said. I'm not arguing with David about whether or not a black person feels afraid to be stopped. I'm not arguing about any of that. My grandkids are black. My son-in-law is black. I've talked to many, many times about this. But I don't think this is an issue that city council or the mayor can solve. I think we need to have our police chief. And then the other problem with, and I know I'm supposed to stop here, the other problem with the hiring problem, they just came in front of city council. We were there last week. The police just came in front of city council. They have a contract, but it doesn't include a cost of living increase every year. So right now, the police don't know if they're going to cost a living increase. We've had 5 police officers quit this year, move on, take better jobs. We're down 5 just this year. So we need to give them a good contract. We need to pay them commensurate with the work that they do. They're below the average of any city our size. We've got to get that in line.
Okay, Tanya Heath.
All right, so I would say that when I was at MU, we always, had a friend looking out for us, and there was more awareness of safety just talked about. And whether that was stopping drinking after 2 or 3 drinks, or it was making sure that you had a friend that you went with and you walked together to your car. I think that there needs to be an advertising campaign as far as just how to be safe when you're out, because I believe that it's a combined effort. The police can have a police presence. They can deal with things once things happen. But I believe that the bar and restaurant owners can also do things with lighting and with cameras and with bouncers and with just having a real presence as far as like, hey, we have expectations for everyone's behavior here. And that's also cutting people off so that they don't get out of hand in a downtown late night situation. I also believe that people have a personal responsibility as far as not leaving things in their car that create opportunities for crime. And then as far as the shootings are concerned, I agree that, statistically, we need to look at what the actual statistics are, but I also know that when I was a Mizzou student, we didn't have shootings downtown. And so I think that it has really psyched out the community, and I believe that we do need to say, look, we are going to be a safe community. It takes all of us, and we need to put everything out there to make sure that we're safe and looking after each other. I created a meditation and prayer interfaith walk that we did November 21st after the 2 shootings, and I just believe we all need to do our part to make it safe. Thank you.
Barbara Buffalo, you're last on this question. Are you safe downtown at midnight, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, first off, I'm not literally with David, but I'm with David now. I'm probably at home on
Probably not
Saturday.
going to be there.
But if you had said like Monday at midnight, will the council just get out? I hope so, before then. But I was gonna say, there's 2 issues here. So when I talk to those downtown, like the beat officers that are walking downtown that work down there and do the CID office there, a lot of times if there's an issue, it started elsewhere and it came to downtown. So, because at first I thought, well, is this just bars closing? Because we did this, we talked about environmental design, but safety by environmental design. We did this walk at 1:00 in the morning one time, where we went and saw what does it look like downtown when bars close. And it gets a little chaotic, right? There were Hit Street, Hits University. There were 3 bars letting out at the same time. And it was just very dense. And I could see where there would be incidents, especially if people have maybe not been making the best personal choices this time you're first to. And so then we talked about the city having more street lights, having lights that came on brighter to help make the space feel safer as well. And so I think we're talking about multiple things here. One, we're talking about that perception of what we read on these statistics. And if it's just across the community, not just downtown. I think that's something to know of. But also, how are the business owners downtown working together? And when we were doing those walks, people were coming together from banks, from bars, from restaurants, from offices, and talking about what they can do to help entertain and educate their community on being safe downtown, and then talking about it in their friends back home. Because if I just read about it, I might not actually be getting the whole story, and so I'm just believing what I read on the headline, and maybe it's not true.
All right. Any questions right now from anybody in the audience that they want to ask? I'm going to ask, okay, ma'am.
As we talk about public safety, I also think about mental health. And so right now, after 5 p.m., if a law enforcement officer responds to a 911 call, they really have 2 solid choices. Choice number 1 being that individual gets transported to a hospital. There's an exorbitant wait time as that person clears the ER, those types of things, or the individual to go to jail. As our mayor and former city manager put forward some funds for ARPA, for a behavioral crisis center, I would just like to ask the group their support for 24/7 behavioral crisis center in Columbia.
Okay, thank you. I don't know whether to let you discover who he is after you
Oh,
answer the
I'm
question.
sorry. For
or-
those of you that don't know me, my name is Matt Gass. I'm the president of Rural Behavioral.
The only reason I did that is because at the school board forum, when he asked the question, it was really good answers, but then he came back and said who he was, and some people were, oh, I wish I'd known that before I gave the answer. So I'm just making sure disclosure.
No attempt to
Yeah,
hide me.
and he's not trying to trick anybody. David Seaman, we'll start with you on this, please.
Absolutely, Matt. Keeping those folks out of the criminal justice system and getting the help that they need is a must. So absolutely.
So you would, again, you would say advocate for a 24-hour service, which has been in the conversation for some time. Randy Mitchell?
So as past president of the board for Phoenix programs, I'm working on the committee with Farrell to get the crisis center in. So we've located a piece of property that we think we can put it on. This will keep police officers out on the street. This is a great program. They've done it down in Springfield. We went down and toured that. So kudos to Burrow and Matt for championing this.
Tanya Heath?
Not knowing all the details about that, I am wondering, instead of one building, if there are properties around Columbia that we could repurpose into multiple, Burrell places, because I just think that this is a crisis now, but in 50 years, who knows, we could solve it and stuff like that. And so I'd like to use existing stuff so that we could put more money into the actual salaries of people rather than the buildings. But I support you.
Barbara Buffalo?
Yes, so obviously I'm very supportive of a 24/7 behavioral access center. I think one of the things, our crisis center, one of the things that I was really interested to hear was the statistic that I can't remember if that was you or CJ or Chief Jones. Someone said that when they're responding, when a police officer is responding to someone having a mental health crisis, it often takes them an officer, sometimes it's two officers, 2 to 4 hours processing this person to get them through like any PC or any psychiatric center. And then from there, if you think about that person might go back on the street because they don't have a social support network, whether or not it's a 96-hour hold or a 21-day hold, that person goes out without a support structure and maybe they're not actually from here. They can't get home or can't get the services they need. With a 24/7 crisis center, we have the opportunity where a police officer takes like 15 minutes for them to process and get them. And then they can be seen by the people with the skill set to know where that person needs to go. And then from there, get the additional social services that they need to be successful, whether or not it's to go back home to Sedalia, if that's where they came from, or within Columbia, or whatever it is that they need. So very supportive and really encouraged with the Springfield Center to see that as a model and to hear the police chief from there talk about that.
Maria or Apollo?
Burrell in Springfield. My sister is a psychologist and comes from Massachusetts to your trainings and your conferences there on trans health. And again, crime, mental health issues, all involved. So yes, I've always been a supporter. In 2018, a group of citizens came together and we discussed another plan on the shelf, which was a co-responder. And I was able to give the results from the city of Denver, where they tracked calls coming into 911 that dealt with mental health crisis, not crime, but a mental health crisis. Out of 1,700 calls, with a co-responder going with the police, they only arrested 79 people out of 1,700. We have a co-responder program here. We haven't funded it well enough to be able to hire the 6 or 7 social workers that we need to do this. As far as the 24/7 crisis center, I hope we can work together and have those two programs come together. So we're less picking up people and taking them to jail and more intervening before anything serious is going to happen, but have a place to go. So as far as using the ARPA funds, that's a story for another day.
Another question?
Yes, I'm Richard Walls. I'm the owner of the How to Progress and past president of the Missouri State Restaurant Association. I am out at midnight. I am out late. I'm all for all the mental health stuff. I think it's great in helping the officers do their job. I'm more concerned about getting shot. plain and simple. My nephew murdered in Kansas City, closing time. He did nothing wrong, just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. I mean, I can handle a fight or mental health or something, but what are we going to do to prevent gun violence? I'm talking about some of the things that have been happening. I'm friends with some of the other bar owners. I'm friends with a lot of the other bar owners. And I want to hear, like, we are not going to tolerate this in our city. And I think that's the mental health. Yes, it has to be addressed. I agree. Everything we can do to prevent violent crime has to be done. But at the end of the night, I mean, when I leave sometimes, I will avoid certain spots and go other ways to not drive through police. And I'm not saying, I support the police, but I see flashing lights down the street or, oh, there's another alert. There was a shooting at such and such. So you kind of become numb to it a little bit. We had it happen outside Boone Tavern. I hear pop, pop, pop. I'm like, it's gunshots. And I'm not like, oh my gosh, I'm freaked out. I'm just like, that's an issue. That's a problem. There shouldn't be people shooting guns at each other. And I think our city needs to take a stand like, hey, this is not acceptable. The same thing as any other, racism's not acceptable. Other, isms are not acceptable. But what would the city do to prevent violent crime
Okay,
at late night? Please.
very real simple question. Randy Mitchell, you're first on this gun violence.
I don't know any way to do this without increasing the staff at the police department. You're not going to get all the guns off the street. You're not going to get law-abiding citizens while we have less police to give up their guns. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. So I think you've got to increase the police department, which would increase the presence. I do think we've got a problem with our courts where people are back on the street before the police officer has the crime report filled out. And so there's a bigger question that maybe at a state level on what our justice system is doing with the people that are back on the street. Because criminals, a lot of times, commit crimes. I mean, that's what makes you a criminal. So the court system needs to I don't know. I mean, I've spoken with the judge. I just had lunch with the judge last week to talk about this issue because of that very thing. Because this is not me and Richard down there shooting at each other. This is people with criminal backgrounds. I mean, so criminals commit crimes, and if those criminals are on our streets, that's really where we've got to start.
Question to you, Tanya.
Yes, so I agree that we cannot tolerate any crime downtown that is violent, because the problem is that I know young people that are already saying that they're not going to hang out downtown. And that makes me really sad, because part of college and part of being in your 20s is socializing, and it helps them develop their mental health. And if they cannot go out and have the normal life that they should have, going to restaurants safely, going to bars safely, and meeting new people, that is a huge problem. And our downtown is dependent upon all of us feeling safe going there. And if people in the suburbs aren't going downtown because they don't feel safe, then that's not good either. So we have to make sure that the people that have the rap sheets are, very much attended to if they are not in jail. Because I think accountability for those types of people that are not changing their behavior for any significant amount of time, they need to have all kinds of counseling, as well as their diet needs to be looked at, and all sorts of other things. Because it's very weird when you look at head trauma, and they're studying that now, and how that affects instant gratification and judgment calls. And so we need to expand what we're doing to make sure that the criminals are not out, and that they are also, not, the solutions match where they are, because they're not on their own choosing better behavior.
Barbara Buffalo, so we hear from a business owner downtown who expresses his concern about gun violence and how it impacts him. He's not like you and David Seaman at home at night at midnight.
I know.
When the
I was
bar's
like, well, I
closed.
actually have been at your bar right before, but I'm just, you know.
I mean,
I didn't
we're,
wanna
I
share
feel
that.
pretty safe where we're at, to be honest.
Right, exactly. Actually, yeah, I
I mean,
can
we're
stumble
kind
back down home from you.
It is, but
Yeah. No,
but
no, no.
it isn't, you know, like, I have had to drive
Yeah.
a different route just because of,
Avoiding.
and I feel like some of our customers own bars. Had a guy come in and he was doing everything. He's got security, the cameras, working with police, and what me. It's a mental health issue. Guys have mental health issues, comes in.
So, Barbara, you're the mayor. How do you address this issue for the
Yeah,
community?
well, I mean, obviously, just like you just referred to, it is, just like the housing, it's a spectrum, right? It's a multifaceted issue. You'll see in other communities, some of the things that they're doing for like gun violence and gun prevention are those intervention programs. I appreciate, Randy, you're hit about making sure you have adequately staffed police department, right? Definitely key. At the same time, making sure that those who should not have guns don't have guns. Like these are minor things that you would think would be basic common sense. But then also these intervention programs. Because like when I talked about the beat officer working downtown, a lot of those incidents are happening, something happened outside and it came to downtown. It's not somebody stumbling out of Heidelberg or Silverball or Vibes or wherever. It happened elsewhere and it came to there. And so I think it's important there that we talk about what are we doing to interrupt and intervent some of those gun violence issues or some of those issues that are happening off that are coming into our downtown because of the concentration of people. So I think it's working collaboratively together. And I appreciate earlier we were talking about bringing together business owners and having that two-way conversation. A lot of times you're just seeing this conversation happen at the dais, at council, with a few people coming up. And you're not necessarily seeing that the community members, council members are also going out and doing. So I want to see more of that as well.
Maria or Paulo?
In September of 2019, a good friend of mine lost her daughter to gun violence here in Columbia. They said it was one of the worst months of gun violence in town during that time. It was horrible. And it wasn't at midnight, it was at 11:25 at night, on her way back from McDonald's to get a milkshake. Right? It's horrible. This past summer, last summer, I guess, there were about 20 business owners, several police officers, and the chief of police, and we all, and citizens who were curious, we met at the Blue Note, and we were talking about lights, cameras, apps that bar owners have, and I think Molly at Billiards has it, where she gets a ding on her phone at home, she can immediately call the police and say, hey, there's something going on in front of my bar downtown. There are things that we can do and are being done and are working, but there isn't the voice behind it. As mayor, as city council members, as community leaders, we need to talk about these things in real time with the people that are being affected, the businesses that are being affected by this. The downtown CID raised some money and gave the city money to buy high-intensity lights to be put at 3 locations downtown. They're talking about more cameras. They're talking about this communication in real time between the police and the bar owners to help prevent it. But crime prevention, gun violence, until we get people not having guns, I'm not sure that's going to happen.
David Seaman, you're mayor. How would you address gun violence?
One, I think I made myself sound like a really old soul busting that go on Saturday night. My wife's probably really mad about it. So to your question, it's a 2-part solution. We have to stop what's happening now, and we have to prevent it from happening in the future. So downtown, and we continue to talk about downtown, and it's bothering me a lot. But downtown, we need more officers. We need more officers present. Once again, we mentioned there's only 14 police officers in the city at any point in time on patrol across 63 square miles. That's not enough. If you want to prevent it in the future, it's going to be an uncomfortable conversation. The uncomfortable conversation part of that is, like Barbara said, it's not happening downtown. It's happening somewhere else, and it's spilling over once those folks meet downtown. We have a gang issue on the north and east sides of the town. The uncomfortable part is most of those folks, once again, look like me. I know this because when I see it reading the paper, so-and-so was shot and killed, I recognize the name because I went to high school with some of them. I know them from out in town. The uncomfortable part is we have to figure out how to solve that. What are we doing to ensure that those folks have adequate housing so that they're not out here shooting each other because they don't have anywhere to go? How do we ensure that they have adequate employment so they have something to lose? You give me a job, you give me a livable wage, you give me something to lose, and I'm much less likely to engage in these types of behaviors. We don't do those things. We let it happen in certain areas, and then when it spills over downtown, then we start to talk about it. But the flip side of that is you have to understand that asking for more police officers, which I'm doing, makes a lot of people uncomfortable. What is the philosophy that we are asking those police officers to take? Is it that warrior mentality of I'm going to come out here and just protect, or is it community policing? Whereas Mr. Siemens in his yard, there are enough officers out in town. I can get out of my car and just walk down the street and talk to him. Hi, Mr. Siemens, my name is Officer Jones. How are you? What if you sit in your neighborhood? I, as a black man, feel much more comfortable police officer in that situation than seeing that cruiser ride down my street. There are multiple levels to this, and understanding all of them is the only way we're going to solve this problem.
We are undoubtedly, this is a topic that needs to be addressed in the next forums. So we're going to move on from that. We're almost done with our time. So this is going to be a word association on something totally different. And we're going to start with Tanya Heath. I'm going to give you the word, and you tell me what comes to mind immediately on this. And it's actually 3 words: Columbia Regional Airport.
Well, I went at 3 years old to greet my daddy from a geology trip. He was a geology professor, so I remember it.
Closer to the mic.
Sorry, I remember it when I was 3, and I am excited that we're going to do a major upgrade because I don't think anything's really happened since '68, right?
I'm not going to answer the question. I'm not running for mayor.
So yeah, I mean, we need to. We're going to grow, and we need to have a good airport so we can get people in and out that are going to make our city better.
Barbara Buffalo, Columbia Regional Airport. What comes to mind?
I know it feels like, why drive when it's so easy to fly?
There's your home fashion.
Right. So what comes to mind is that I'm excited about the expansion. I was involved with the team that reviewed all the plans that came through and saw what we had there. I'm worried when I see that we have airlines cutting. We're not unique to this. Regional airports across the nation, obviously, we don't make as much money and we don't have like guaranteed revenue for those places. But I know the importance that a regional airport brings to economic development within Columbia. Just like with the Precision Next Gen alone, like imagine all the different researchers that are going to be coming through and potential businesses. They're going to use the things that are coming out of that research center. They're not going to want to ride. Well, they probably won't want to ride in a shuttle from St. Louis or Kansas City and like the convenience of flying into Columbia. There's no knock on our shuttle systems. I've also ridden those as well. But I look forward to seeing the growth of that. I do want to see a little bit better transportation system that takes us to it. Because I will say that is the one thing I think of opportunity. Either we're going to have tons of gravel parking lots that are just going to basically go all the way to Ashland to provide parking for Columbia Regional Airport, or we look into a shuttle system. And when we talk about vision for the future, light rail, if we could eventually have some sort of light rail system going between here and the airport, so when visitors or future students or football players come into town, just hop on that and ride into town. This is my dream.
Maria or Paula?
Thank you. A couple of things come to mind. One is yay. I'm happy to see the airport be expanded because Columbia only grew by a certain amount in the past 10 years. I'm predicting that by 2030, we're going to have immense growth in our city because we are a city people want to be at and work in. The other thing that's happening, it's already happening, is development in the area of the airport. There are businesses and there are housing developments and entertainment things that are being developed in the area of the airport. It's going to grow. We need to keep up. And I agree 100% about transportation from the city. The way we spend transportation funds on the airport, we can spend transportation funds on appropriate transportation from the city of Columbia to the airport. A lot more of us would fly from here if that were true.
All right, David Seaman?
I said two words that come to mind are inadequate and potential. So inadequate, I fly to Philadelphia once a month for grad school. And if you've ever flown out of the Columbia Airport, you've sat in that little one-room terminal with 30 other people, and it's not the greatest thing in our life. Kind of consider going to St. Louis. Potential is that we are increasing the capacity for the airport. And there's a lot of potential there, as both Barb and Maria have said, to bring in new visitors, to attract new residents, new businesses. As if you're a business owner, and you can fly directly out of Columbia instead of going to St. Louis or Kansas City, that's a plus. So, yeah, inadequate at the moment, but there's a great deal of potential.
Randy Minshew, Columbia Regional Airport.
So we have to grow the airport. I think, part of the job as the chief ambassador for our city is to be the chief ambassador for our airport. And so there are contracts with the university, with the private companies, VU, equipment share. There are agreements just waiting to be inked. It's a matter of getting out there and getting that done. I think that's Mayor McDavid, Bob McDavid, championed that cause. I think somebody needs to, if I'm lucky enough to be the mayor, pick that up where he left off.
We're going to start our 60-second closing comments. This is the chance for you to recap whatever you want or go a different direction. We're going to start on the opposite end that we did at the beginning of this hour and a half, and that is with Maria or Pablo.
Hi. I hope you consider that as a person who has asked the city to review its policies, its procedures through the performance audit, that's sort of an indication of where I would go as mayor. Looking at the basics so that our very professional, very competent staff, all of them, can do the job they were hired to do to the fullest extent. I'm not afraid to ask questions because I love this city and I think the answers will help guide us to a good, solid future. Thank you.
Barbara Buffalo?
Thank you, David. Well, as I mentioned in the start, Columbia is in a period of transition, and what we decide April 5th will help decide where Columbia is going. We don't want to be left behind as we have a new mayor, new council members, we have a new city manager. There's so much potential for Columbia. So having somebody with the experience to know the institutional knowledge of what is going on at the city and who those partnerships are available in Columbia, we want that person, and I believe on that person. Thank you, David.
Tanya Heath?
I'd like to balance the basics and make sure that we have garbage collection taken care of, that it's streamlined. I'd also like to look at snow removal because sometimes our neighborhood, we've been stuck in our houses for 5 days and the snowplow hasn't come and we have to do it ourselves. And just get the basics in order. And then I'd also like to look at the future of Columbia and the vision and the work behind it that we need to do, and we need to involve everybody and think about what other cities have done successfully so that we can do that with our city, but also increase the communication to all of our residents, because I think there's a disconnect as far as what the average resident knows and understands about Columbia. And so I would be honored to be that person that brings everyone along with a good conversation and a clear direction. Thank you.
Randy Minshew?
So I think the difference between me and the other candidates really comes down to leadership versus management. My style, what I see the mayor's job, what I see the city council's job is to lead and not to manage. We have a city manager, that's his job. We have department heads, we have 1,500 people that need to be managed. That's not the job of the city council. City council and the mayor are to lead our city. I love Columbia. I'd love to be the chief ambassador. I'd say, please, let's do something different on April 5th this year. Let's get out and vote. Let's encourage our friends to get out and vote. And I would love to see us show up in force this year and have above average turnout for the vote. Thank you.
And David Seaman.
Well, first, I'd like to thank the Board of Realtors for hosting this event. I want to thank my fellow candidates for having a lively discussion. I'm looking forward to a couple more forums. This is like the most fun election. I can tell you that from having done this 3 times now. Forums are the best thing about this, and meeting folks. I want to thank David Lau for spending the last couple of days before he retires actually deciding to moderate. We talked about a lot of topics here tonight. And as I said before at the beginning, my opening remarks, my focus is on making sure that each of those topics is viewed through the lens of all people in the city. Because we all deserve the promise that is Columbia. We can't focus simply on traffic service for one group, or policing for another, or downtown, or out in the outskirts. We all live here. We all deserve equal treatment. We all deserve to benefit from what the city has to offer. And on April 5th, I hope that you elect me mayor so that we can continue to do that. Thank you.
I will say this, I'm not going to retire from interest in the city or passion for the city or involvement some way, but I do want to thank you all for starting this journey as candidates, because some of you have run for offices before, some of you have been on commissions and committees and dedicated yourselves with a lot of energy and jobs, so a lot of energy for the city. Thank you for loving the city enough to want to run for mayor. And the best of luck, because you're right, this is the first of probably a few forums between now and April 5th. Thank you for being here. And those of you who have been in the audience, the questions are good. And also thank you for your attention. If you can manage, we're going to take a 15-minute break, and then at 8 o'clock,